What if the only thing standing between you and your dreams was one person noticing you? One moment that changes everything? Jordan was just another street musician, ignored by the world, until Shaquille O'Neal stopped to listen. What happened next? No one saw it coming. Wait, before we go any further, I gotta ask, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments and don't forget to subscribe. The city never stopped moving. The sidewalks pulsed with life. Tourists snapping selfies, businessmen barking into their phones, vendors waving signs for cheap sunglasses and hot dog deals. Laughter, horns, footsteps, and beneath it all, in the middle of the chaos, a lone voice fought to be heard. Jordan sat on a worn-out stool, his fingers gliding across the strings of his faded acoustic guitar. His voice was rich, deep, filled with something real, something people should hear, but no one did. No one stopped. No one listened. Jordan wasn't playing for fun. He wasn't just another guy on the street hoping for spare change. This was his life. The guitar in his hands, his only real possession, the songs he sang, his truth. Yet as he poured his heart into the music, people walked right past him like he was invisible. A group of teenage girls strolled by, giggling over something on their phones. A businessman in an expensive suit paused for half a second, then dropped a single penny into the tip jar. Jordan's fingers faltered on the strings. A penny. The businessman smirked, adjusting his tie as he walked away. Jordan exhaled slowly. Figures. Across the street, a street magician had a full crowd. People gasped as he pulled a coin from behind a kid's ear. Jordan shook his head, gritting his teeth. A few feet away, standing near a convenience store entrance, a towering figure watched silently. Dressed in a black hoodie, dark sunglasses and sweatpants, he blended in. But anyone who looked closely would have recognized him instantly. Shaquille O'Neal. He stood still, arms crossed, observing the scene in front of him. His eyes flicked between the magician's crowd and Jordan, comparing, analyzing. The magician had tricks, flash, a spectacle. But Jordan had something real, yet no one cared. Shaq's jaw tightened slightly. Jordan finished his song, letting the last note linger in the air. Silence. No applause, no acknowledgement. His tip jar, an old coffee can, sat nearly empty. A few crumpled bills, a couple of dimes, that single penny. He sighed, reaching down to adjust it, as if that would somehow make people notice it more. Shaq saw the look on his face. Not just disappointment, but something deeper, something like defeat. Shaq glanced around, watching how people moved through the streets, how they overlooked something incredible right in front of them. His fingers tapped against his leg. Then finally he muttered to himself, "Let's see how deep this goes." He took a step forward, but he didn't reveal who he was. Not yet. Jordan's final note hung in the air for a brief, hopeful second. Then, nothing. No applause. No words of encouragement. Just the buzz of the city swallowing him whole. A couple strolled by, so close he could hear their conversation, but they didn't even turn their heads. The woman laughed at something on her phone. The man checked his watch. Jordan might as well have been a ghost. His fingers tightened around his guitar. Maybe they just didn't like the song. Or maybe, deep down, he already knew the truth. People weren't ignoring his music. They were ignoring him. The click of polished dress shoes made Jordan glance up. A businessman in a crisp navy suit strode past, pausing just long enough to reach into his pocket. For a moment, Jordan's heart leapt. Maybe, just maybe, this was the moment someone recognized his talent. But then, clink, a single penny dropped into the jar. Not a dollar, not even a quarter. A penny. The businessman smirked, adjusting his tie. Don't spend it all in one place. Then he walked away, chuckling to himself. A few feet away, Shaq's jaw tightened. He had seen ignorance before. But this was disrespect. He wasn't just watching some kid get overlooked. He was watching someone's dream get stomped on. Shaq shifted his stance, arms crossed. His initial curiosity was turning into something else now, something personal. Without saying a word, he pulled out his phone. He hit record. If the world refused to see what was happening, maybe it just needed a different angle. Shaq didn't just want to watch, he wanted proof. He scanned the people walking by, waiting to see if anyone at all, would step up. Would someone else recognize Jordan's gift? Would someone drop in more than a few cents? Would someone care? But the truth settled in fast. No one did. And then, things got even worse. A sharp voice cut through the street noise. "Hey, you can't be here!" Jordan flinched. A security guard wearing a stiff uniform and a scowl strode toward him. "Pack it up," the guard said, arms crossed. Jordan's grip on his guitar tightened. "What? I have a permit. I'm not breaking any laws." The guard shrugged. "Doesn't matter. You're a nuisance." Shaq's eyes narrowed. He slipped his phone into his pocket. Then he stepped forward. But he still didn't reveal who he was, not yet. Because this was about to get interesting. Jordan's heart pounded. This wasn't the first time something like this had happened. Security guards, business owners, even random pedestrians, they all acted like he was in the way, like his dreams were an inconvenience. He had a permit. He had a right to be here. But that didn't seem to matter. The security guard in front of him barely even looked at the laminated paper Jordan pulled from his pocket. "I don't care about that," the guard said flatly, arms crossed over his chest. "Doesn't matter. You're a nuisance." A nuisance. The word stung, not because it was new, because it was all too familiar. The first time he tried playing in a cafe, the manager kicked him out after one song. The time he saved up to rent a tiny studio apartment, his landlord evicted him the second he fell behind. And when he told his father he wanted to be a musician, he still remembered the way the old man laughed. "Grow up, son. Nobody cares about a dream that don't pay the bills." Jordan had pushed past every one of those moments, grinding through the rejection, holding on to the belief that if he just kept playing, one day someone would listen. But right now it felt like the world was telling him, "Give up." His fingers curled into a fist beside his guitar case. Not today. He squared his shoulders, voice tight with frustration. "I'm not breaking any laws. I have a right to be here." The security guard scoffed, unimpressed. "Yeah, well, I have a right to keep this area clear. So you can leave, or you can get escorted out." A few people in the crowd paused, watching. Not because they cared, because they loved a little street drama. Jordan's stomach twisted. He had seen this before. If he pushed back too hard, they'd call the cops. If he backed down, they'd take his spot forever. He was about to say something when, "What's the problem here?" The voice was calm but heavy. Jordan blinked. A massive figure had stepped forward, hands stuffed casually in the pockets of his hoodie. The security guard turned, his frown deepening. Jordan couldn't see the man's face clearly. Dark sunglasses covered his eyes, but something about him felt different. The air shifted. This wasn't just some random guy stepping in. This was someone used to commanding attention. The security guard sized him up. "Move along, buddy. Unless you're buying something, you can't hang around." Shaq smirked. "Buying something?" he mused, tilting his head. He reached into his pocket. The guard's eyes widened. Jordan stiffened. What was he about to do? The air between Jordan and the security guard was thick with tension. People had started watching, not because they cared about the music, but because they loved a little public drama. A performer getting kicked out? That was street entertainment. Jordan could feel it happening all over again. Another spot lost. Another dream trampled. His grip tightened around his guitar as he braced for whatever came next. But then, a single movement changed everything. Shaquille O'Neal, still unrecognized in his hoodie and sunglasses, casually reached into his pocket. For a second, even Jordan tensed. Was he about to pull out his ID, a business card, a lawsuit? The security guard took a half step back, and then a crisp $100 bill floated down into Jordan's nearly empty tip jar. Silence. Not just from Jordan, from the entire street. A woman walking by actually stopped mid-step. A man pushing a stroller paused, blinking. The security guard's face twitched with confusion. Jordan's eyes widened, his throat dry. "What?" A whisper rippled through the onlookers. "Wait, did that guy just tip $100? Who even does that?" A teenager pulled out his phone, elbowing his friend. "Yo, film this. This is crazy." Even the security guard looked thrown off. His tough demeanor wavered as he tried to process what just happened. Sir, he started, clearly scrambling for control of the situation. "But Shaq?" He just shrugged, completely unfazed. "I just came to enjoy the music," he said smoothly, flashing a casual grin. His voice was calm, steady, like this was just another ordinary moment, like he hadn't just shut down the security guard's entire argument with one effortless flex. But the people around him, they weren't calm at all. The energy shifted fast. Suddenly, people who had ignored Jordan started paying attention. A businessman who hadn't even looked at him before now pulled out his wallet. A woman reached into her purse. Someone in the back muttered, "Well, if he's worth 100, I can at least throw in 5." The same crowd that had walked past Jordan without a second glance was now digging into their pockets. Because if a guy like this thought Jordan's music was worth something, then maybe they had been wrong for overlooking him. Jordan swallowed hard, staring down at the $100 bill like it wasn't real. His hands felt frozen on the strings of his guitar. He had dreamed of this moment before. Someone noticing him, someone making the world stop long enough to hear him play. But this was different. He looked up, his heart still pounding. "Man, you kinda look like Shaquille O'Neal." A small smirk played on Shaq's lips. "You think so?" The security guard's eyes nearly popped out of his head. Gasps, whispers, more phones coming out. The realization was spreading fast. And as Jordan stared at the man in front of him, still trying to wrap his head around what just happened, one thing was clear. This night was about to change his life forever. For a few seconds, the street was completely still. The security guard stood frozen, his authority crumbling in real time. Jordan was speechless, his hands gripping his guitar like it was the only thing keeping him grounded. The crisp $100 bill sat at the top of his tip jar, standing out among the crumpled dollar bills and loose change. And then, a little voice pierced the silence. "Mom, that's Shaq!" The words were like a spark in dry grass. People who had been passing by suddenly stopped in their tracks. Heads turned. Phones shot up in the air. "Wait, what? Shaq? Here?" A woman gasped. A teenage boy dropped his soda. The security guard's face lost all color. Jordan looked at the towering man in the hoodie and sunglasses and suddenly felt his stomach drop. This isn't happening. But it was, and it was happening fast. People started pushing closer. The once invisible musician was suddenly the center of attention. Someone in the back muttered, "I knew he looked familiar." A guy in a suit immediately pulled out his wallet and dropped a 20 into Jordan's jar, as if trying to correct a mistake. A woman dug into her purse and tossed in a 10. Suddenly, people who had walked past Jordan without a glance were lining up to drop money into his jar. It wasn't about charity. It was about not being the person who ignored the talent Shaq just co-signed. And Shaq? He still hadn't said a word about who he was. The security guard, who had just been demanding Jordan leave, now looked like he wanted to disappear. He cleared his throat, eyes darting around nervously. Shaq turned to him, finally speaking. "Still want him to leave?" His voice was calm, smooth, but it carried weight. The security guard gulped. No, of course not." The crowd laughed. A guy in the back shouted, "Nah, bro, you were just doing your job, right?" More laughter. The guard forced a weak chuckle, rubbing the back of his neck. "I just wanted to keep things clear, you know?" Shaq raised an eyebrow. "Looks pretty clear to me." The security guard took a step back. Jordan still couldn't believe what was happening. People had ignored him all day. Now they were watching him like he was a star. He looked at Shaq, his voice almost shaking. "I don't even know how to thank you." Shaq smirked, shaking his head. "Don't thank me yet." Jordan blinked. Wait, what did that mean? The crowd leaned in, waiting to see what Shaq was about to do next. Because something told them, this moment wasn't over. Not even close. For the first time in Jordan's life, the world had stopped for him. People who had ignored him all day were now pushing closer, watching him. The energy had shifted so fast that it almost felt unreal. Just minutes ago, Jordan was an invisible street performer. Now, people were whispering his name. And at the center of it all, Shaq, standing tall, arms crossed, a slight smirk on his face, as if he knew exactly what he was doing. Then he clapped his massive hands together. All right, he said, his deep voice booming over the crowd. The murmurs died down instantly. Everyone was listening. Shaq turned toward Jordan and pointed at him. "This guy, he's got something." He gestured toward the crowd. "And I think it's about time y'all paid attention." The crowd cheered. Shaq grinned, then challenged them. "If this guy's good enough for me, he's good enough for y'all." More cheers. Jordan swallowed, his heart racing. He had spent years trying to get people to stop and listen. Now the moment was finally here. Jordan took a deep breath. His fingers brushed the strings of his guitar. And then, he played. But this time it was different. The weight of rejection, the frustration, the loneliness, it was all still there. But now, so was something else. Hope, excitement. He sang, his voice raw, powerful. The lyrics weren't just words anymore. They were his truth. And this time, people listened. A woman in the front swayed, tapping her foot. A guy with a skateboard bobbed his head to the rhythm. A little kid clapped, grinning up at his mom. And then, the tip jar started filling up. A $5 bill, a $20 bill from a businessman in a suit. People who had walked past him minutes ago were now lining up to show support. The energy was electric. Jordan wasn't just playing, he was owning the moment. And Shaq? He stood back, watching, satisfied. The sound of guitar strings wasn't the only thing filling the street. It was the sound of cameras clicking, of people hitting record on their phones. This moment wasn't just happening live. It was about to hit the internet, hard. In the back of the crowd, a man with slicked back hair and a sharp suit lowered his sunglasses. He leaned toward the guy next to him. Yo, is that a record producer over there? Jordan had no idea. But Shaq, he noticed, and his smirk grew wider. Because this was just getting started. Jordan's fingers strummed the final chord, his voice fading into the night air. For the first time, real applause erupted around him. People weren't just watching anymore. They were captivated. He felt it. This was the moment he had been chasing for years. The moment where his music finally mattered to someone other than himself. But what he didn't know, this was only the beginning. Because in the back of the crowd, someone was watching him very closely. Someone who could change his life forever. A woman clapped, turning to her husband. He's incredible. A teenager whispered to his friend, I gotta post this. This guy's blowing up. Bills and coins kept dropping into the tip jar, but Jordan barely noticed. His chest heaved from the performance, his heart still hammering. Then a deep voice broke through the noise. That was one hell of a performance, kid. Jordan turned and froze. Standing before him was a man in a sleek, charcoal gray suit, expensive sunglasses resting on his head. He had a confident posture, the kind of presence that immediately commanded attention. Jordan's throat went dry. Who was this guy? The man took a step forward, extending a hand. Name's Andre Collins. I'm a music producer. Jordan blinked, his brain trying to catch up. A producer? Was this some kind of joke? Shaq, still standing nearby, grinned knowingly. Jordan hesitated, then shook Andre's hand. The producer's grip was firm, serious. This wasn't a joke. Andre tilted his head. You ever recorded professionally? Jordan swallowed hard, his palms suddenly sweaty. No. His voice came out hoarse, like he wasn't even sure this was real. Andre smiled. Well, that needs to change. Shaq nudged Jordan with a smirk. Told you. Jordan shot him a look. Told me what? Shaq chuckled. That all you needed was for the right person to hear you. Jordan shook his head, still in disbelief. This doesn't happen in real life. People don't just show up on the street and get discovered. But here he was, standing in front of a real producer, with Shaquille O'Neal casually acting like he had planned this all along. Jordan's mind raced. This was what he had dreamed of, what he had prayed for. But now that it was happening, he had no idea what to say. He glanced at Shaq again. I don't know what to say. Shaq just smirked. You could start with yes. Jordan exhaled sharply, nodding. Then Andre reached into his pocket and pulled out a sleek black business card. He held it between two fingers, offering it to Jordan. Let's talk. Jordan stared at it. His future, his entire life, might be on that card. And just as his fingers brushed against it, a sudden voice from the crowd made everyone turn. Wait, are we watching someone get discovered right now? More phones lifted into the air. More whispers. Someone in the back was already tweeting. And as Jordan took the card, hands still shaking, one thing was clear. This night was far from over. Jordan stared at the black business card in his hand, his fingers trembling slightly. The name Andre Collins, music producer, was printed in bold letters. The crowd around him buzzed with excitement, still processing what had just happened. Minutes ago, he had been just another struggling street musician. Now, he had an actual shot at making it. It felt surreal, like he had somehow stumbled into a dream he didn't even know he was allowed to have. He looked up at Shaq, his heart still hammering. Man, this is crazy. You did this. Shaq chuckled, shaking his head. Nah, you did this. I just made him look. Jordan swallowed hard. It was hitting him all at once. Shaq hadn't just handed him an opportunity. He had forced the world to see what they had ignored. Shaq had changed the narrative, and now Jordan had no excuses left. Jordan ran a hand over his face, trying to process everything. For years, he thought talent was enough, that if you were good, people would notice, that if you worked hard, the doors would open. But that wasn't how the world worked. Talent wasn't enough. You needed opportunity. You needed someone to amplify your voice. Shaq had done that, and now the only question was, what was Jordan going to do with it? Andre Collins, the producer, was still standing there, watching Jordan closely. You look like a guy who's still trying to figure out if this is real. Jordan let out a breathy laugh. That obvious? Andre grinned. Yeah, but let me make it simple. You're good, kid, real good. I've been in this industry for years and I know talent when I see it. He tapped his business card. Call me tomorrow. Let's set up a studio session. No pressure. Just see what happens. Jordan felt a lump in his throat. Tomorrow? This was happening now? Shaq clapped him on the back. See? You got this. Just don't mess it up. Jordan shook his head, still overwhelmed. I don't even know how to thank you, man. Shaq smirked. Well, now that you mention it, he leaned in, voice playful but serious. How do I get my $100 back? The crowd burst into laughter. Jordan cracked a grin. The tension finally broke. For the first time that night, he allowed himself to enjoy the moment. He wasn't just a street performer anymore. He was something more. The cameras were still rolling. Social media was already exploding. And Jordan? He was about to take the biggest step of his life. Because tomorrow, he wasn't just going to play on the street. He was going to step into a real studio. Jordan had barely stepped inside his tiny apartment when his phone started buzzing like crazy. At first, he thought it was just leftover adrenaline from the night. Then he noticed something strange. It wasn't stopping. His phone was glowing with notifications, the screen lighting up faster than he could read. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, DMS mentions, comments, hundreds, no, thousands of them, and the numbers were climbing fast. Jordan frowned, his stomach twisted. What the hell is happening? Then he saw it. Someone in the crowd had filmed the entire moment. From the second Shaq dropped the $100 bill to the moment Jordan realized he was talking to a real music producer, and they had uploaded it everywhere. The title? Shaq Changes a Street Musician's Life Forever. It had already hit 5 million views in 2 hours. Jordan's jaw dropped. Number freaking? Wait, Jordan opened his Instagram. That morning he had 412 followers. Now, 10,000. And still rising. His TikTok was even worse. He had posted a clip of himself playing weeks ago, barely getting 200 views. Now, every single post was flooded with comments. Dude, I saw you on my For You page. Your voice is insane. Bro, you're famous now, WTF? I just watched the video 10 times. Someone signed this guy already. Jordan stumbled back onto his couch, gripping his phone with both hands. His email inbox was flooded. And these weren't just random fan messages. There were actual record labels reaching out. Labels. Meanwhile, Shaq was sitting in his car, watching the numbers climb. His notifications were going wild too, but he wasn't even fazed. He had seen this happen before, because he knew what he had done. He had just flipped Jordan's entire life upside down in one night. And the crazy part? This was just the beginning, because this wasn't just about one musician. This was about recognizing talent everywhere. How many Jordans were out there? Grinding, struggling, getting ignored, waiting for someone to see them. Shaq had just proven that sometimes one person is all it takes. And now, the world was watching. Jordan's phone buzzed again. But this time, it wasn't just another notification. It was an email from Good Morning America. His eyes widened. He sat up straight, rereading it twice. Jordan, we saw your incredible story and would love to have you and Shaquille O'Neal on the show. Let us know when you're available. His heart pounded. His fingers hovered over his phone screen. Was this really happening? He immediately called Shaq. Shaq? I think we just made the news. Shaq laughed on the other end. Told you. Now get ready, kid. The internet wasn't done. The video kept getting reshared. Major celebrities started commenting. Even famous musicians were reacting to it. Someone on Twitter wrote, "How is this guy not signed yet?" Another person said, This is the kind of story we need in 2025. Shaq is a real one for this. And then, a reporter tweeted, I just got confirmation. Shaquille O'Neal and Jordan will be appearing together on national television. This story is about to get even bigger. Jordan sat in his apartment, staring at his phone, still trying to process it all. Shaq had just turned his world upside down. And now, the world wanted more. National TV, news interviews, record labels. This wasn't just a viral moment anymore. This was a career-changing opportunity. Jordan leaned back, exhaling, because tomorrow, his life would never be the same again. The stadium was packed, thousands of fans. Their cheers rumbled through the arena, shaking the very air Jordan breathed. Bright stage lights beamed down on him, making the moment feel almost surreal. Just months ago, he had been playing to no one, ignored, invisible. Now, a sea of people stood before him, waiting for his voice. And at the center of it all, Shaq, front row, arms crossed, proud. Jordan tightened his grip on the mic, took a deep breath, and started to sing. The chords flowed effortlessly from his guitar, the same song he had played on the street, the song that no one had stopped for. Now had thousands singing along. Phones lit up the air like stars, capturing the moment. Fans swayed, eyes closed, completely lost in the music. But Jordan's eyes, they found Shaq. And in that moment, he knew. This was bigger than him. It had been a whirlwind few months. The TV interviews with Shaq, the record label meetings, the studio sessions that lasted till dawn, the first time he heard his song on the radio. It all led to this exact moment, standing on stage, proving to the world what Shaq had seen in him from the very start. And it wasn't just about the fame, it was about the lesson. After the show, backstage was chaos. Fans screaming outside, cameras flashing, his manager talking about tour dates, but Jordan barely heard it, because Shaq was waiting for him. Jordan grinned, shaking his head as he walked over. Man, you really did this. Shaq chuckled. What did I tell you? You had it in you the whole time. Jordan exhaled, shaking his head. I was ready to quit that night. You changed everything. Shaq smirked. Nah, I just made him look. You did the rest. Weeks later, Jordan walked down a familiar street, guitar case in hand, not to play, but to listen, because somewhere out here, there was another Jordan, another kid grinding, waiting for someone to stop. He spotted a young performer, a girl, maybe 16, singing her heart out, just like he had. And just like before, people walked by, not listening. Jordan smirked. Not today. He stepped forward, pulled out his wallet, and dropped a $100 bill into her case. The girl gasped, looking up. Her eyes widened. Wait, you're? Jordan nodded. Keep playing. They'll listen soon. And just like that, the cycle continued. As he walked away, Jordan thought about Shaq's words that night. Sometimes all it takes is one person to believe in you. Now, he was that person. And this was just the beginning.